things, Bonnie.
What has happened?
So you were here.
Yeah.
To maandamano ili happen.
Ndio hiyo sasa.
Karibu sana Bonnie.
Asante sana. Good to be here.
And of course, it was an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
Nikikwambia vile tukula tear gas huko hivyo.
Ndio hiyo sasa. Freedom is costly.
Bonnie, by the way, what's your take on whatever has been happening?
No, I think one of the things that is happening in the nation, which is a very good thing, people are realizing that they don't have to tolerate injustice. And for a long time, there has been fear. People fear speaking up against injustice, against wrong leadership, against people just not doing things the right way. But I think, like somebody rightly said, the Gen Zs pricked our conscience and we realized, hey, by the way, si lazima to tolerate vitu zenye sio right. We can actually speak and in a peaceful way and bring reason to the table and say, hey, by the way, if we've been going wrong, we can no longer continue going wrong. There has to be a turning point where we begin going the right way. And I think I must applaud the Gen Zs for being bold, courageous, and standing up for what is right, because justice honors God any day. Any day.
So you think now ship may change direction?
Sasa ship inaanza kuchange direction towards the right direction. And I think even the people who are using power irresponsibly now are aware that business is not as usual.
It is
so
serious.
Ukikuwa irresponsible 2027 watu wanakupiga red card. You have to be responsible with power.
Kama mwingine amevaa t-shirt imeandikwa we are sorry.
I'm telling you. Na watu wanakataa hiyo sorry yako. Wanasema we want to see your actions. Unajua hata babi unasema bear fruits of your repentance.
Unaona saizi hata like today a group of investors pale Tatu City just coming out and saying governor Flani amekuwa kitu extort and somebody said these cases don't go anywhere because unakuta watu wanapeana evidence ni watu wa chini wanatishiwa but when you see such big people like even serious investors coming out that tells you that something is changing. Wameka mahali wakasema we don't care if we do business in Kenya or not, but we have to tell Kenyans this is what some of their leaders are doing, which for me ship ita take time kuturn kabisa, lakini ina turn pole pole. Still waiting to hear from the president. Alikuwa ametuambia atatuongelesha. I'm praying for him on a very serious note. The other day pia opposition leader join and that's also an eye opener that ground inaanza ku change.
Absolutely.
We are losing the grip tumekuwa nayo kwa ground and if you had a grip kwa ground because of where you come from or the masses you control and then you start seeing a shift. Now the grip is based on what you do, what issues, you say and justice, what you mean, issues, service. It's a wake-up call for any politician out there. Wow. Karibu Boni.
Asante sana.
Sorry kwa kuengage kwa hizo mambo.
No, those are important issues.
Ni vizuri tusikie opinion yako kwa sababu
lazima tujenge taifa.
You are a man of wisdom.
Thank you so much.
Upara inaonyesha
the bigger the upara sometimes
David King akona upara lakini anafuga nywele inakataa. We started a series, tough times, strong men.
Yes.
And literally now we are in a tough time.
Absolutely. Tough time season.
We touched on the men and a lot of things are happening in their lives. Some even wrote here about family, etc. And the aim was to encourage the men out there.
Absolutely.
Because last month was the mental health month for men.
Yes.
And we ought to also continue with it kwa sababu Kenya ilikuwa tuanze, si Mungu atatusaidia kumalizia.
Ndio hiyo sasa.
So Boni, where we left versus where we are right now. Unataka tuendelee aje?
Yeah, and again, like you've rightly said, these are tough times. And I want to begin with a quote that I read many years ago. I've never forgotten it. Somebody said that tough times create strong men. Strong men create easy times. And easy times create weak men. So I think being that we are in a tough time, we are in the perfect environment for a breed of strong men to emerge. And I think, like we were just sharing earlier about even the things that have been happening in the nation, we are beginning to see people rise up. Young men saying, we need to stand strong for our nation. We need to stand for what is right and what is just. So when we talk about tough times don't necessarily have to bury men. They can actually be the place where strong men are created. Unajua kama sword saa zile inatengenezwa inawekangwa kwa moto, na hiyo moto ndio inapatiaga hiyo sword a certain strength and a certain sharpness, right? So we are in a perfect space where if we manage it well, we will come out stronger, we will come out better, and we don't have to sink because of the challenges around us. There is a way we can manage the internal man and make him stronger, even regardless of the fact that we are going through very difficult times. Yeah. Yeah.
So these young men
yes.
in universities, colleges, and mi wana message mingi hapa ni vile roho imevunjwa, imeparagashwa, imefanywa nini. I wouldn't want to say it's a phase we all go through. I wouldn't want people to go through heartbreaks. But Boni is seeing the number of young people not calling it quit because of a relationship gone south.
Yes.
What can you tell our young men this afternoon? When you're talking about kadem, ama amewachwa, ametokwa na wakitokwa wanajitoka. Unakuta mtu ameandika suicide note. That really breaks my heart. Kuna mental strength flani. But I feel like kuna mental strength flani tunafaa kujaribu kudevelop. I don't know what you can say, Boni, to these young people. Nimechoka kuona hizo messages.
And interestingly, as you say that, it's not just happening in universities, even in marriages. Recently, I was reading a story of a Jama who was left by the wife. And of course, they separated for a while, and then akaanza kupasu wife. Kumbe the guy had been going through such serious depression because of your humiliation ya kuachwa. So the guy actually looked like he wanted to reconcile with the wife, but he had already hatched a plan on how he was going to kill the wife and kill himself. So wife akaanza kuwarm up, anafikiria ni kama, the guy now wants to change and what have you. So the guy invites the wife over to come, and he locks them in the bedroom. He shoots the wife 4 times, and then he shoots himself 1 bullet in the head. So these are issues that are not just affecting young men. I think men generally, we are having a difficult time processing the emotions that come with disappointment, with discouragement, with despair. A lot of men don't know how to handle the valley. And I think that's what we talked about the other time, that in life, you will go through a valley. That's a given, right? But how you go through the valley is a decision only you can make. And it begins with, when you're in a valley, which direction are you looking towards? And I think that's one of the things that I want to talk about today, because ukipitia valley, uko na options tatu. Unaweza angalia around, upate umesurroundiwa na the valley itself. Unaweza angalia chini, urealize yenyewe, by the I am down, I am low, my heart is not in the right place, my mind is not in the right place. Or you can actually look up. And that's why David alisema, I will lift up my eyes to the hills, which means by the time he's talking about lifting his eyes to the hills, he was in a low place. That's why he needed to look up. All right. So the number one thing that I want to address today, and especially when it comes to issues of mental health, is that it is not what we go through as men that destroys us. It is what we focus on when we are in the valley. And that's why David anatuambia, when you're in the valley, don't focus on the valley. Lift up your eyes. In other words, there has got to be a shift in focus for there to be a shift in energy. For so long as you're looking down or you're looking around, you give the depression or the darkness an opportunity to hold you better than it had held you. All right. So we are saying that when you go through a season, for example, umewachwa or umelose job, because these are realities that are happening. Right now, I think you are just sharing with me about the dynamics around, even how the president may need to reconstruct the government. There are people who may lose their jobs. And it's a given that there are men that will lose their jobs. Now, the question is, when you lose your job, what do you focus on? Do you focus on what you've lost, or do you focus on how you can make a comeback by lifting up your eyes to God, right? So the issue of focus, and when you're going through a difficult time as a man, the one thing you must guard the most, na ndio unasikianga Bible ikisema, Bible inakuwaga imesema hizi vitu zote, inasemanga guard your heart. Ukisoma Good News Translation inasema watch over your thoughts, for your thoughts determine your life.
Bonnie, right? Yeah. Lifting your eyes to the Lord inaka statement kwa mtu ako kwa ngori.
Yes.
Practically, how does it look like?
Now, number one is realizing the sovereignty of God, no matter where you find yourself in. Now, I'm saying this because I found myself in a place where I've lost a job. Yeah. Kuna time moja, I think nishai kuchapia hii story. Kulikuwa na ngori job. And of course, somebody had committed fraud. And being a good Kenyan, you know, you try to live for Christ everywhere you are. I decided to report the fraud. Little did I know that I was going to be thrown under the bus. 2 weeks after I reported that fraud, I was given a letter of interdiction, you know, jina yangu ikaanza kuharibiwa, and a lot was going on. I remember that time because, in fact, interestingly, that story was even run in the papers. You can imagine being in the papers for doing the right thing. Yeah, people daily. The story was run in the paper daily.
This guy is no longer...
we were mentioned because we were, I think, about 6 people that were interdicted. Na sisi ndio tulikuwa whistleblowers. And it was not a very easy time for me, man, Karis, because first of all, I was questioning myself and even questioning God and asking God, you mean I am doing the right thing? And instead of being blessed, you know, we've been taught that gospel, and it's a false gospel, by the way. Yeah, the gospel of that if you do the right thing, that bad things will not happen to you, suffering will not happen to you. That's not what the scripture teaches. Yeah, in fact, Jesus said that in this world you're going to have tribulation. So of course, nikasimamishwa job. And then this rumor started spreading, right? That huyu jamaa anajifanyanga mse wa God na ndio huyu sasa ako kwa scandal. And in fact, like almost all the speaking engagements that I had in churches were cancelled for doing the right thing. That tells you that there are times God will allow us to go through a difficult season so that he can see how focused we are on him. And I almost got bitter. In fact, as I talk about issues to do with mental health and distress and depression and despair, these are things I've experienced in my own life. And it happened, interestingly, man, Karis, hiyo ndio time nilikuwa nimebainda yangu ya kwanza. KBH 355 J Buddha. Sasa kwanza unajua do imeibiwa kwa kampu. So people are adding up. I say, ujamaa do imepotea. And then sasa, ameenda kabaidinga. Evidence. I remember even my own mom, you know, called me and asked me, you know, I am hearing there is this story that's going on, umesimamishwa job, na naona umebai gari, you know, what is it here that you're not saying? And I began to discover that there are valleys that you go through, that even the people that you thought trusted you, you actually realize perhaps they don't trust you as much as you thought. And that's what I'm saying, in those seasons, and I felt like I was cornered. I felt like literally I didn't know how to pull out of that situation. And I remember, and it's good you've asked that question, you know, what does it mean practically to look, to shift your focus? Number one, it means that you've got to get to a place where you release yourself to a place of trusting God, realizing that you cannot take yourself through that valley, that you need the help of God to walk through that valley. All right. And this is one thing that you see in the life of David. And even for me, I realized that time, if I had not released myself to God and say, hey, God, you know my integrity. You know that nimesimamishwa job for doing the right thing. You know that I have a family to feed and I don't have an income now, but I'm going to trust you. All right. And that's the most difficult thing to do, because at that point, you will begin to realize you've been trusting yourself. You've not been trusting God. You've been trusting that you're the one who provides for your family. All right. So I had to get to a place where I said, hey, I'm going to surrender everything to God. I am going to trust that no matter what life has brought my way, God is able to walk me through this valley. So the shift of focus is a shift of surrender, that you've got to get to a place as a man. And you know, the one toughest thing to tell men is to surrender, because we are taught to conquer. We are not taught to surrender. So when a man hears surrender, surrender has been made to look like it's a weakness, like it is something that people who are helpless do. And it's true. But here is the thing. When a man surrenders to God when he's in a valley, there is a light that begins to come through from God when God sees that, hey, you are in a valley and you're willing to surrender. So number one, it means coming to that place where you say, I will surrender to God and I will have faith that God can actually take care of me. Is that easy? No, it's not easy at all.
Number one, let's pause there. We come and look at practical. No, John, I'm going to just look unto the Lord.
Practical things.
This is the afternoon switch in your afternoon.
Shajara ya biashara na Dolly Mwirigi.
Hujambo na karibu. Shirika la ndege la Malaysia Air Asia X linatarajiwa kupanua njia zake barani Afrika kwa safari ya moja kwa moja kati ya Nairobi na Kuala Lumpur nchini Malaysia. Kuanzia Novemba tarehe 15 mwaka huu, shirika hilo litakuwa likisafiri mara 4 kwa wiki hadi Nairobi na kurudi tena Malaysia. Mkurugenzi mtendaji wa shirika hilo, Benjamin Ishmael, alitangaza kuwa tiketi ya kusafiri kwa njia moja tu itagharimu takriban shilingi 26,399 katika upande wa economy class. Kuala Lumpur ni kivutio maarufu cha watalii ambacho huvutia maelfu ya wageni kila mwaka kwa mji mkuu wake wenye shughuli nyingi pamoja na urithi wa kitamaduni. Na kwingineko ni kwamba wafanyabiashara na wateja katika maeneo kadhaa nchini wanakabiliwa na uhaba mkubwa wa mboga. Hii ni baada ya mvua kubwa kunyesha katika maeneo kadhaa nchini. Mvua kubwa ilionyesha mwezi Machi ambayo iliacha uharibifu iliathiri sana kilimo. Mazao kama vile karoti, viazi, mboga yalianza kuoza mashambani kutokana na kuwepo kwa kiasi kingi cha maji, huku ikisababisha kupungua kwa mavuno na baadaye kuongezeka kwa bei ya mboga. Katika soko la eneo la Kenol, kaunti ya Murang'a, baadhi ya wafanyabiashara katika soko hilo wanasema uhaba huo umewalazimu kutafuta mboga kutoka eneo la Eldoret, huku wakisema kuwa mauzo yamepungua sana kwani wateja wanadai kwa gharama ya maisha inazidi kupanda. Hapo awali kilo moja mboga ina sukuma wiki na spinach iliuzwa kwa shilingi 60 na shilingi 40, huku bei hiyo ikipanda hadi shilingi 120 na 100.
The person, just hold on to Jesus, and write out your story. Remember, it's promise. He said, "I never forsake you." Though the waters are troubled. For your answer is coming. Just hold on to Jesus and just write out your story. Write out start. God is still with you. You may not feel it, but you're not alone. You're hurting now, but your morning is coming. Lord of mercy, just hold on to Jesus and write out your story. Write out your story. God is still with you. You may not feel it, but you're not alone. You're hurting now, but your morning is coming.
Naitwa George Nooks there. Your morning is coming. You may not feel it, but you are not alone. What a song there. George Nooks, Ride Out Your Storm. It's getting us to 23 minutes, the top of the hour. Bonnie, I can see on the other side the president is addressing the nation.
Yeah.
Kuna cabinet things happening.
Yeah.
Let's see how that will go. And of course, our news team is ready when with updates. So tagia tu hapo utakuwa unapata kila kitu. I interjected and asked you the question because I realize it's something we tell people, look up to Jesus, look up to Manzai, angalia tu. And now that you said you've gone through this, I wanted to know practical, putting this, looking up to Jesus,
absolutely,
look up to, where does my help come from? How is it practical? And you said number one is
just getting to a place of trust and surrender. And that's the first point of call, because usipo involve God kwa story yako, then life will put you on that corner and squeeze you really well. But the second thing that is also quite practical that I also did, and I also want to just share from my own life so that people can realize that these are not things beyond what we can do. These are practical things we can do, all right? Number two is that I looked for support. And one of the things that I've realized happens with most men, wakipitia ngori, instead of looking for community, they isolate themselves. And yet, there are times where you cannot handle the darkness around you alone. You need other men around you. You need voices that can encourage you around you. But unfortunately, most people now wanakuanga kama David. I don't know whether you remember that story of David. Sazile alianza kuwa na stress. Saul wants to kill him. A lot was going wrong. Instead of David looking for support, he retrieved to some place called the cave of Adullam. All right? So the worst place a man can go to when he's going through a valley is a cave. Because na hiyo cave inakuwaga, for most men, it's an internal place. Unapata all of a sudden mse amenyamaza. Like recently, something interesting happened. A friend of mine, they had been going through serious challenges in their marriage. So one time too, wife yake akaamka, the wife was having a very good job, and she decided she's done. She left. She just decided to leave the marriage na akaenda na watoi. Right? So after she left and she left with the kids, I decided, okay, because I know the temptation for most men when they go through a difficult place is to isolate themselves. And the second thing they do after they isolate themselves, they look for a coping mechanism. So coping mechanisms are men zinakuwaga, you can almost tell what a man will use to cope. So number one, either a man will begin to want to be suicidal. So when you isolate yourself from people who can speak hope to you and encouragement to you, unaanzanga kufikiria manzi, whatever I'm going through is so difficult, I cannot come out of it. So you start thinking about suicidal thoughts. And you find that in the book of 1 Kings 19. Elijah alitishwa tu kidogo hivi akaanza kusema, I am the only one. Right? And that's the worst thing that a man can begin telling himself, that I am the only one. Me too ndio nime lose job, me too ndio marriage yangu haiwork, me too ndio watu wangu wana rebel, me too ndio niko in this situation. And that's the cave. And that's why we want to encourage men, when you are going through a difficult season mentally, emotionally, don't go to a cave, go for community. Allow me to read one verse that points to this. Yeah, 2 Corinthians chapter 7. It's a very popular verse, and this is when Paul went to Macedonia. Paul alienda Macedonia na alikuwa anapitia vitu ngumu sana as a man, right? And you can imagine, this is a guy that knew God. It's not that he did not know that God is able to take care of him. He knew he had a serious revelation of Christ. All right, but look at what he says in 2 Corinthians 7:5. Paul anasema, when I arrived in Macedonia, there was no rest for us. All right? We faced conflict from every direction, with battles on the outside and fear on the inside. That's what happens when a man is going through a dark place in life. And ananga ku feel like, there are battles on the outside and there is fear on the inside. And that's why now that kind of a man begins to withdraw. Unaanza kufind anataka kuwa peke yake, hataki kufai kuwa around watu wanaweza open up. But look at what Paul did, yeah? Verse 6. Because he trusted God, Bible inasema hivi in verse 6, but God who encourages those who are discouraged, encouraged us by the arrival of Titus. In other words, the practical thing that happened is that this man called Paul got Titus, and the verse 7 inasema, when Titus came, his presence was a joy, so was the news he brought of the encouragement he received from you. Now you see what is happening here. Paul anasema, we went through such a difficult time, we were despairing, we were overwhelmed, but here is what happened. When we trusted God, God sends a person. And that's why I want to encourage men to realize, hey, when you're going through a difficult situation, don't close yourself in. Because the moment you close yourself in is the moment the darkness will continue to take over your mind, right? Utaanza kufikiria thoughts zenye hufai kufikiria. So I was talking about some of the things we do as men, and especially when we don't reach for community. So number one, we look for coping mechanisms. Yeah, coping mechanisms inaweza kuwa drugs. There are men who, even though born again, ngori ikimnyorosha properly, unatafuta mali utaenda, you want something to make you forget the reality of what you're dealing with. And here's the thing, you cannot cope your way out of darkness. You need to find light. You need to find light. And part of how God brings light is when we trust him, vertical relationships, and then 2, when we look for strategic relationships like Titus, people who bring encouragement, people who bring joy. And let me tell you, there is no time a man can go through a dark season like where God hajaeka somebody around him that can bring encouragement and bring joy. The challenge is, because for men we have pride and ego, is that we say, wacha ni handling ngori kimanman, kimacho man, kimwanaume, yeah? So you end up being overwhelmed, and yet God had a Titus around you, somebody that could bring encouragement and somebody who could bring joy. Because the 2 things that can bring a man out of a dark place are those 2 things. Before you even find a solution, if you can recover your joy and recover your encouragement, it is just a matter of time before you come out of that place. So let me encourage the men not to be, stuck in trying to process things alone. Get somebody around you, get a brother around you that can help you to process. And they may even say something that they didn't even know was going to be helpful to you. They may even share their story with you. And you find that in that mutual interaction, unaanza ku find joy in a come and encouragement in a come. And when a man gets joy back and encouragement back, he has the strength to fight again. But if he doesn't get those 2 things, he is defeated even before the battle is over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. That is how literally and practical, the practicality of looking unto Jesus.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. And Bonnie, we live with people.
Yes.
We are in a community.
Yeah.
You've challenged men to as you've shared that Paul Titus scenario.
Yeah.
Bonnie, how do we support the boy child around us in during difficult times? For example, we are not good at opening up.
Yeah.
we are encouraging each other manze, itabidi tumeongea, kijana ongea, manze, a parent right now has a kiddo in campus, and this kiddo has zimad simu for a while now, you know, kuna kitu imehappen, kuna cut break mahali nini, and you find you know, even the young guys, wachana mimi, give me space, you know. How do we get to a place of yes, you need space, but we are going to be in this space, you know, even maybe at home you've realized maybe something has happened at the place where your husband is working. You have a 1-year-old kiddo, you married recently, and you're like, he's shouting. Unajua the words anasema ni nipatie space. How do we give space but still be because hata mimi wakati naambiaga nasemaga home niache nipatie space, bado kuna kakitu kanasemaga wazee, usipo infringe kwa hii space itakuwa noma. Usipofanya kitu hapa itakuwa noma. How do we keep distance but still be in this space?
Here is where love comes in. You know, love is the willingness to get into somebody's space sometimes, even when you know they are pushing you away. Right now, there are men that I journey with. You know, we journey together, we do life together. And there are times I can sense, you know, maybe a certain guy is going through a certain thing that I know could be overwhelming him. And the temptation is he's pulling away. Part of my duty as somebody who loves that person is to actually say, you know what? Let's just go out and watch a football game. So first of all, you do things that may not look like you're trying to give them a solution, but try to do things that will get their mind out of what is overwhelming them. Because the temptation for men when they begin going through difficult situations is to overthink. The temptation for women is the opposite. The temptation for women is to overspeak. Right? So when a woman is going through things, she will look for ways to speak and to ventilate. But for a man, he will look for a place to be silent and try to figure out a solution. Now, and that is where now depression comes in. Because now you are in this place, you want silence, you want to have space, but then your mind does not have the capacity to figure out the answer at that point, because perhaps you're processing too many things at a time. So if you have a good friend that knows you and loves you, part of what they need to do is to just take you to a place where they know you will have an experience that you enjoy. For example, kama si anajua unapenda ball, akuchukue tu, akupeleke uone game ya Gor na you know, one of the local teams, So because the thing we are saying is, if the mind is not taken care of, then the man continues to go into that cave, right? And this is the place where friends come in, where they come and they begin to pull you out of that cave by giving your mind an alternative focus. The problem is, for most of us, when we sense like somebody is pulling away, or when we sense like somebody is going into that cave, tunamuachanga, tunasema, I've even tried to reach out, but I respond, you know, so tunachoka haraka. But the thing about love is that, ukisoma 1 Corinthians 13, inasema love endures all things. And the duty of human beings, especially who are born again, who are in relationships, is to develop a love that can endure and go beyond those seasons of discomfort. I was talking to somebody the other day that was saying, best yake alikuwa amemcall akamwambia, manze nasikia ni kama nakuwa overwhelmed na life. And because this other guy, what that was called, was busy, you know, busy doing very legitimate things, ministry, family, nini, he never reached back to that guy. He continued being busy. The next time when he wanted to reach out to that guy, he was receiving a call that the guy committed suicide 2 days ago, and they found his body in the house. So ujamaa guilty kanza kumkula, because he was thinking, what if I just stopped what I was doing and just called this guy and said, okay, let's go out and do a cup of coffee, or let's go out and watch a game, or let's go out and do a road trip or something, right? Let's go out and do something that will get his mind out of that. The problem is we get tired too quickly, or we allow ourselves to be too busy, and we fail to understand that at the end of the day, life is about the relationships you have, not the activities you're doing. Because msekao yosa die, and perhaps there is something you could have done about it. There is an encouragement you could have given him. There is an injection of joy you could have given to him. So I want to encourage men. And by the way, part of how we do this also, part of how we bring encouragement to other men is sharing our own stories, how we've walked through our own darknesses, our own valleys. Tuache historia, unatakanga kuonekana we ni otero kila time, right? You never talk about vile mnakatianaga na wife yako. Part of one of the things that I've enjoyed is just having men that I can talk with about things that are very practical, you know. Tumekatiana na wife aniongeleshi na mimi pia sisiki kumwongeleshi. Jana hata mimi last year nilipitia ngori kayo. So you find in the sharing of stories, one, there is relief. And then two, the situation now is brought down to size. Because usually when we are trying to think, we are going through, we exaggerate. Men exaggerate things in their minds, right? But when we talk about things and we are real with one another, hey, by the time last year wife alininyima fare na alikuwa anataka kwenda mali, you know, things like those. What that begins to do, then you begin to take the role of a Titus in somebody's life. You begin to bring encouragement and joy. And like I said, you know, the one thing darkness does is to take away your strength. And guess what your strength is? Your strength is your joy. Nehemiah 8:6. Nehemiah nasema, the joy of the Lord is your strength. So if you can find a way to bring joy to another man, either getting him out of that environment that is depressing him, you know, sharing your story, especially sharing your story. And that's unapata Jesus alipo resurrect, hakuonesha wase crown, alionyesha wounds zake. Kwa sababu wounds za mse, akikusha wounds zake hata unaona hii kidonda niko nayo itapona. Because you realize what they went through perhaps was even more intense than what you're going through. Yeah, so
I agree. You know, I joined the men's chorale. Kuna wazee, kuna 80, 75.
Wanakuchapia ma story.
Kuna wengine hapo 60s. Na before tuanze kuimba, si uchapa ma story.
Ma story, yes.
Na unaweza kumenyamaza hapo. Lakini unakuta jioni mzee fulani na kuimba ile conversation manze, kuna vile nitandika. So I think Bonipia, men needs to be in spaces where men are there.
Absolutely.
And you know, men that actually want the best for you.
Yes.
I love the fact that you've insisted, you know, love haichoki. Na feel ni kama tunachoka. Unakaa kando, unasema atamaliza kuprocess vitu zake huko. Please tuko saa hizi mtu hayuko peke yake. Unakuta mtu ako kwa simu, anaangalia vitu za kujiham na nini. And as we're talking to men also, I think these are things that we can implement even kwa every gen across the board. That unajua mtu anakuanga hivi, all of a sudden amechange, ama umepata report job, kuna kitu imehappen. Una reach out, anakwambia manze sisiki kuongea, unatuma message, kesho asubuhi unaandika ni aje, usingoje kutafute, kwa sababu lazima tuko kwa hiyo space. Kwani kuna msee hapa anasema who is this guy on air? Anaitwa Boniface Ng'ang'a. Boni ni mwenyeji, wewe ni mgeni, karibu sana. Anasema he's speaking to the men. I would like to journey with him. I don't know what's your take about this.
We can definitely do that.
Of course, Boni is very active on social media. Boniface Ng'ang'a, you can inbox him there. And somebody also anaitwa Nathan hapa hivi, ako hapa live Facebook. Anasema this Boni is speaking to my situation. I got out of campus in 2020. I hit a job but lost it again. Before even settling, I've been struggling so much mentally, and I opted to cope by indulging in gambling. But I'm grateful for this discussion. It's helpful.
So unapatanga, especially the coping mechanisms, and this is what we want men to realize, that finding a coping mechanism cannot bring you out of a dire situation. It only prolongs your stay there, na inafanya unazoea a dysfunctional space in life, right? So unapata, like we said, men cope with gambling. There are men who cope with pornography. The reason why pornography is such a huge addiction for men is because it's a very close coping mechanism. It is as close as your phone. So unapata maybe come say wife yake amemwacha, you know, and I feel there is this virtual woman that does not need as much work as this other one that is walking away from me. And then the other thing that, of course, men used to cope is drugs, right? And the worst that men used to cope with is suicidal thoughts, right? So inaendaga hivyo. So men either try to look for a pleasurable thing to cope, or they try to look for a permanent solution, which is what is called death.
Wow.
So unapata, if a man does not break that cave and look for a support system amongst other men, iyo cave itamzika. Yeah. Na kama hiyo time nilipitia hiyo ngori, I'm telling you, I had very bad thoughts, man, Karis. I mean, at some point, I even remember saying, just thinking in my mind, so amenisimamisha job. What if I just go and look for some petrol bomb and just bomb that building? Ichomeke tu yani. Because how do they do this kind of injustice to me? I'm trying to do something right. I'm finding myself on the wrong side. Hiyo ndio time ya first nilipelekwa DCI Buda. Sijapelekwa kwa karao. Nilijipata manze niko na msee, sijui ameiba do ngapi kwa bank inside. Mi niko katikati kama Yesu katikati ya wezi wawili.
Wameshika snitch. Tutakupanish.
I'm telling you, yeah.
Boni, tukimalizia. Ni poa to recall vitu ulikuwa umesema last time na ulisema kuna vitu zenye ni lazima zihappen kwa cycle ya mwanadamu. Utakuwa misunderstood. Utajikuta kwa valley, utakuwa hata judged wrongly, msana anaweza kuona hivi. Msana anaweza kuona hivi na mwe uko a certain way. Ni vitu zina happen. And hata Yesu akituambia manze hii mtaa utapata tribulation. Alafu anasema be of good cheer, manze, have overcome these things for you. Anatuashua pia hakuna kitu tunaweza pitia yenye hatuwezi overcome. Even if it comes, you know, I've equipped you to overcome. Absolutely. Na men, boy child, whether you're married or you're out there dating or you're in school, because unakutata shule ina stress watu. Ukiangalia hata reason unakuta jenzi wengi kwa barabara, wengine tu ni kukuja kuvent, wengine ni kukuja tumepata opportunity. Coping mechanism haiwezi kutoa kwa ngori. Na hiyo ndio take home yangu Boni. That hata Yesu hakuonesha wase crown, alionesha wase wounds, manze, scars. So if you have a scar na umekuwa kwa scene yenye unasikia mtu anaongelea kitu, open up. Ongea. Kwa traffic ministry kuna time fulani tukipray, tulikuwa tuma boy hiyo day. Tukamention msemo fulani akasema ombea boy wangu amemari na kulikuwa na issue mtani, this is what they did. I don't know, the guy will look up to an elderly, you know, he said I would like to talk to your boy. Even me nikiwa kijana I did the same thing. You know, we looked at him and like, how did your marriage survive? How you married 20 plus years right now? And I said ambia kijana aniongeleshe. And I felt like, you know, this is a resource of a man we have here, and it's very open.
Our stories are powerful.
Manze, to share even the things in very private, just to save another young man.
Strengthen another man.
Wow. Thank you, Boni. Asante sana.
Asante. Thank you so much for having me.
And I'm a man, and I keep things to myself. And this time I get suicidal, you know, and it keeps things to themselves. And now, you know, you have to allow Christ to come in, and also you have to realize that there is a Titus.
There's a Titus
around you.
Usikufe kwa cave,
man. The song I just want to play here, Boni, before to talk about David Wanda. I think it talks to this issue. And we're going to have sessions with Boni here, even as we continue. Thank you so much for your time.
Listen and live on 93.3 FM in Nairobi, 93.9 Western Kenya, and 101.9 Mombasa.
See you tomorrow. And tomorrow I have a special guest, by the way. Can't wait to have him here. David Wanda with Broken.